The maintenance hatch hissed open, not with the sharp, efficient sigh of a well-oiled machine, but with a weary, phlegmatic wheeze. To anyone else, it was just a noise. To Poncho Brennan, it was a sentence in a language only he understood. Low hydraulic fluid on sublevel 47. Probably a slow leak in the tertiary coupling. Annoying, but not critical. Not yet. It was a problem he could solve, a truth he could hold in his hands. In the tangled, groaning guts of Concordia Prime Station, problems were honest things. He pulled his 38-year-old frame through the narrow opening, his coveralls a canvas of his life's work. They were stained with a galaxy of grime. The iridescent shimmer of xylene lubricant, the stubborn black grit of carbon-scored conduit, the rusty smear of good old-fashioned Terran iron oxide. No detergent known to man or alien could ever truly purge them. They were the tattoos of his trade. His hands, once capable of field stripping a plasma rifle in total darkness, were now weathered maps of calluses and minor burns, their story written in scar tissue. His face, reflected back at him in the dull sheen of a conduit pipe, had long forgotten the architecture of surprise. It was a face that had settled into a state of quiet, perpetual readiness, like a man waiting for a storm he knew was always on the horizon. "Daddy, you smell like burnt plastic again." The voice, small and clear as a bell, cut through the station's constant hum. Poncho turned, a smile finding its way to his lips as if drawn by an invisible string. Perched on the rungs of a service ladder was his daughter, Talwin. At 7 years old by human counting, Dragon Age equivalents were a fuzzy, contentious science. She was a splash of impossible color in the gray utility tunnel. Her scales were the soft, luminous lilac of the Ashwing bloodline, a shade poets in the Draconis expanse supposedly wrote sonnets about. But her eyes were uniquely her own. Not the fierce, molten gold of her kin, but a warmer, gentler hue, like sunlight seen through honey. They were eyes that held a universe of curiosity, and in their gaze, every aching muscle in Poncho's body forgot its complaint. She wore her favorite pink dress, its back cleverly reinforced with a flexible panel to accommodate the delicate fold of her wings without pinching. The sight of her there, so small and bright amidst the industrial gloom, never failed to send a protective jolt through his heart. "I told you not to follow me down here, sweetheart," he said, his voice a low rumble that held no real reproach. "These tunnels aren't safe for little dragons who should be in school." "School let out 2 hours ago," Talwin announced with the impeccable precision of a child who had been counting the seconds. "And you promised we would practice my human writing before dinner." Poncho checked his wrist unit, a cheap, battered model that perpetually ran 3 minutes slow. She was, of course, right. He had gotten lost in the work again, the way he always did when his mind needed a harbor. Down here, in the honest, rumbling belly of the station, surrounded by the straightforward problems of failing circuits and pressure differentials, he could almost forget the life he had shipwrecked 6 years ago. Here, a leak was just a leak. A broken wire was just a broken wire. They didn't ask questions he couldn't answer. "You're right, Tal. I did promise," He wiped his hands on a rag that only succeeded in smearing the grease into a broader, more artistic stain. Give me 10 minutes to log this maintenance request and clean up. Then we'll work on your letters. Deal. Deal, she agreed, then added, with the careful, over-enunciated cadence she used when practicing Galactic Common instead of her native. Clicking draconic tongue, is it true there is a big party tonight? Owner at school said the Empress herself will be here. The name landed in the space between them with the weight of a fallen star. Empress Sylvandra Ashwing, matriarch of the Draconis Expanse, commander of the fleet of Eternal Wings, sovereign of 200 systems. She was a figure of myth and power, a being who ruled through a blend of ancient tradition and terrifyingly modern military might. She was also, in a biological sense that neither she nor Talwin knew, the source of the lilac scales on his daughter's back. The truth of it was a cold, hard stone lodged deep in his gut, a secret he carried with him every waking moment. The gala is for important diplomatic types, Poncho said, his tone carefully light, a featherweight construct built to bear no scrutiny. Not for maintenance workers and their hungry little dragons. Now come on, before you get grease on that dress and we both get in trouble. They navigated the labyrinthine maintenance corridors with the ease of long practice, a familiar two-creature parade. Talwin chattered about her day, about a lesson on stellar nucleosynthesis, about a friend who could change the color of his scales when embarrassed, about the puzzling human habit of small talk. Poncho listened, his engineer's mind automatically making notes of their surroundings. A stress fracture in junction box 9B that would need reinforcing, a flickering light panel on the cross connector that hinted at a failing capacitor. The station hummed and throbbed around them, a living entity housing 3,000 distinct species, each adding its own unique frequency to the symphony. Crystalline luminaire beings from Prism 7 communicated in dazzling, refracted light shows. Methane-breathing Verlac traders moved through the halls in their environmental suits, looking like ambulatory, whispering fog banks. And there were the dragons. Always the dragons. They moved through the station with the unconscious, gravitational grace of apex predators who had evolved intelligence alongside their claws and fire. Some wore the ornate, ceremonial armor of the draconian military, polished to a mirror finish. Others were draped in flowing synthetic silks that shimmered like captured nebulae. All of them were physically immense, their presence felt in the very air, in the subtle vibration of the deck plates under their weight. They made humans like Poncho look like temporary, fragile visitors. He had learned not to stare 6 years ago, when he first arrived at Concordia Prime, desperate and hollowed out, seeking work that asked no questions about the ghost he had been. The station administration had been happy to hire a human with his engineering skills, no matter how overqualified he seemed for basic maintenance. The pay was enough for a small, perpetually dim apartment in the human quarter, and they hadn't batted an eye when he showed up for his interview with a dragon hatchling in a carrying sling, her scales still soft, her golden eyes barely open, mewling softly for a mother who would never come. "Daddy, you are thinking sad thoughts again," Talwin said as they emerged from the service tunnels into the brighter, cleaner air of the residential levels. I can tell because your face does the thing. What thing? Poncho asked, deflecting with the skill of a man who had built a life on it. The thing where your mouth goes flat and your eyes look at something far away that I cannot see. She tugged at his hand with a strength that always surprised him. Dr. Kelvin says when humans do that, it means they are remembering painful things and need to talk about their feelings. Dr. Kelvin sounds like someone who gets paid too much to state the obvious, Poncho replied, but he squeezed her hand back, feeling the familiar, cool texture of her scales against his palm. I'm fine, Tal, just tired. Come on, let's work on those letters. Their home was a 300-square-foot sanctuary in Residential Tower 9, a masterclass in efficient space management. Talwin had the single bedroom, her ceiling fitted with glow panels that mimic the starfields of the Draconis Expanse, a gift for her 5th birthday that had made her squeal with delight. Poncho's room was an alcove off the main living area that contained a fold-down sleeping pad and a kitchenette so small he could practically cook dinner from his bed. The walls were their gallery, papered with Talwin's artwork, crayon renderings of dragons and humans holding hands, of starships with smiley faces, of imagined worlds where everyone, regardless of shape, spoke the language of friendship. Poncho had painstakingly learned to read Draconic script out of necessity when Talwin started school. Now, he guided her small, three-clawed hand through the frustratingly rounded shapes of the human alphabet. She struggled with the letter S, a shape her natural writing instinct, honed on angular draconic glyphs, wanted to render as a series of sharp lines. Why do humans write so many circles? She complained, her brow furrowed in concentration. Circles are inefficient for conveying semantic precision. Because humans are inefficient creatures, Poncho said with a soft smile. We make up for it with persistence and an unhealthy tolerance for mediocre coffee. I do not understand coffee, Talwin declared, moving on to the letter T, with more confidence. It smells like burnt dirt and makes you move faster without improving your actual velocity. That might be the most accurate description of coffee I have ever heard. They worked in a comfortable silence, the only sounds the scratch of her stylus on the tablet and the distant, rhythmic thrum of the station's life support. It was a piece Poncho clung to, a fragile bubble in the vast, indifferent universe. But bubbles are made to be popped. His wrist unit chimed, a sharp, intrusive sound. His supervisor's harried face materialized on the small display. Brennan, we need you on gala duty tonight. Moulton called in sick, and we're short-staffed. Environmental control for the Starlight Ballroom. Should be easy work. Just monitor the atmospheric processors and make sure nobody freezes or suffocates. Pays time and a half. Poncho's first instinct was to refuse. He had planned a quiet evening with Talwin, maybe watching one of those historical dramas she loved, where ancient Earth humans performed inexplicably brave acts against impossible odds. He could almost feel the weight of her small, warm body leaning against him on the couch. But time and a half. The words echoed in his mind, a pragmatic mantra. Time and a half meant better food next week. It meant he could start saving for the upgraded wing supports Talwin's doctor had mentioned she might soon need. It meant security, a concept as fragile and precious as glass in a universe that offered so little of it to a human raising a dragon on a maintenance worker's wages. "I'll be there," Poncho said, the words tasting like ash. "What's the dress code?" "Clean coveralls. You'll be backstage. Nobody will see you anyway." The transmission ended with a click. Talwin looked up from her letters, her luminous golden eyes performing their silent, devastating magic. They conveyed a depth of disappointment that no words could ever capture. "I know, sweetheart. I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick. "But Mrs. Halver next door said she'd watch you tonight. She makes those honey cakes you like." "I like your cooking better," Talwin said, but she was already accepting the change with the resilience of a child who had learned early that plans were fragile, ephemeral things. "Will you be back before sleep time? I will tuck you in even if I have to carry you from Mrs. Halver's while you're sleeping," he promised, the vow solid and real in his heart. "Now finish those last 3 letters, and I'll make us something for dinner." He heated a nutrient paste that boldly claimed to be authentic earth beef stew, but tasted more like resignation and broken promises, supplementing it with fresh vegetables from the station's hydroponic gardens. Talwin ate with the delicate, precise movements of her kind, her small claws navigating the human-designed utensils with increasing dexterity. She was getting better at it each week, more comfortable inhabiting the liminal space between her two worlds. After dinner, Poncho showered, the hot water doing little to sluice the fatigue from his bones. He changed into his cleanest set of coveralls, navy blue, with the Concordia Prime Maintenance emblem on the shoulder, a badge that marked him as part of the machinery, essential but invisible. He checked his reflection in the small mirror. The man staring back had aged a decade in 6 years. Brown hair was retreating, flecked with gray at the temples. Lines were carved around his eyes from squinting at poorly lit repair manuals and from sleepless nights spent watching a hatchling sleep. It was the face of a man who had traded one kind of duty for another. Hidden beneath his shirt, against his skin, hung a small chain with 2 metal tags. His fingers found them by instinct, tracing the familiar ridges of the stamped text. Property of Terran Colonial Marines. Identification number 7742. Echo. Blood type O negative. They were ghost limbs of a life amputated. The tags had no official meaning anymore, not since he'd walked away from the covert operations unit that had been his entire existence before Talwin. But he kept them anyway, a cold, metallic reminder of who he used to be, and of the bloody, complicated path that had led him here. "Daddy, you look very handsome," Talwin said from the doorway, her judgment delivered with the absolute sincerity only a child can muster. "I look like exactly what I am," Poncho replied. "But thank you," he smiled, "a human who knows which end of a wrench to hold. Now come on, let's get you next door before I'm late." Mrs. Halver was a Verlac elder, her environmental suit modified with extra support struts to accommodate her increasing frailty. She spoke in a series of wheezing clicks that Poncho's translator earpiece rendered as cheerful welcomes and extravagant promises of honey cakes. Talwin hugged him goodbye, her tail wrapping around his leg in the draconic gesture of deep affection, a silent language of the heart that human arms could only clumsily approximate. "Be good," Poncho said, kneeling to her level. "And remember, if you have nightmares about the I should wake up Mrs. Halver, and she will call you immediately," Talwin finished for him, her expression serious. "I know, Daddy. I am 7 now. I am practically grown up." "Practically," Poncho agreed, his heart performing a familiar, painful clench at the thought of time's relentless march. Someday, she would ask questions he could no longer answer with comfortable half-truths. "I love you, little dragon. I love you, too, Daddy Human." The Starlight Ballroom was a universe away from the maintenance tunnels. It occupied the entire upper level of the diplomatic tower, a cavernous space engineered to accommodate the vast size differential between the station's inhabitants. The ceiling soared 100 feet overhead, maintained at a height comfortable for the largest beings, while smaller species navigated on anti-gravity platforms that drifted like dandelion seeds. Tonight, it had been transformed into a vision of breathtaking opulence. Floating crystal lamps cast shifting, prismatic light through holographic curtains that pulsed and shimmered in response to the ambient mood of the crowd. Delicate tables were arranged in concentric circles around a central stage, each a self-contained ecosystem calibrated for the specific atmospheric and gravitational needs of its occupants. There were Terran representatives in stiff, formal black, looking uncomfortable and out of place. Luminaire nobles refracted light in patterns too complex for the human eye to decipher. Verlac merchant princes gleamed in polished environmental suits. And the dragons. There were so many dragons. Their collective body heat was pushing the environmental systems to their limits. They wore the formal regalia of ancient houses, ceremonial armor inlaid with precious metals, wings adorned with jeweled clasps that caught the light and threw it back in defiant sparks. They moved with a casual, unthinking dominance, their presence both magnificent and intimidating. Poncho entered through the service entrance, a ghost in the machine, nodding to the other maintenance workers stationed at their posts. His assignment led him to a cramped, dimly lit control room tucked behind the stage, a space walled with monitoring screens displaying a dizzying array of data: temperature gradients, oxygen levels, CO2 saturation, particulate counts. It was the station's vital signs, and he was the night shift doctor. The technician he was relieving, a tired-looking Verlac, gave him a terse handover. "Atmospheric mix is standard for mixed species. Dragons run hot, so we're keeping the temp on the low end. If anything goes tits up with the stage presentation, you're authorized to initiate an emergency shutdown." "Questions? Who's presenting tonight?" Poncho asked, more out of professional habit than genuine curiosity. "The Empress herself. Something about trade agreements and mutual prosperity. Very exciting for people who care about such things." The Verlax translator rendered his tone as profoundly bored. My shift ended 3 minutes ago. Good luck. Poncho settled into the worn, uncomfortable chair, his eyes automatically scanning the monitors with the practiced ease of someone who had once monitored far more critical systems under infinitely worse conditions. Out in the ballroom, the gala was a swirling kaleidoscope of diplomacy and display. He told himself he wasn't looking for her. Empress Sylvandra Ashwing, Talwin's biological mother. He doubted she even remembered the brief, politically complicated encounter 6 years ago that had resulted in an egg, abandoned in a military hospital, unnamed and unwanted. Draconic culture did not form pair bonds like humans. Illegitimate hatchlings from fleeting affairs were considered shameful complications, to be discreetly discarded or relegated to state-run creches. But Poncho had been there. He had heard the tiny, confused mewling from the newly hatched infant, a small, lilac-scaled creature with nowhere to go and no one to claim her. And something in his own shattered soul, a man drowning in the ghosts of missions and men lost, had seen a lifeline. In saving this one small, abandoned life, perhaps he could salvage something of his own. So he had filed the adoption papers, had claimed the hatchling as his daughter under the surprisingly progressive Terran law, and had walked away from everything. He had never regretted it, not for a single second, even on the days when keeping food on the table meant skipping a meal himself. The ballroom lights dimmed. A single, brilliant spotlight carved a path through the air, illuminating the central stage. And then she emerged. Empress Sylvandra Ashwing possessed a presence that was almost a physical force. Nearly 9 feet tall when fully upright, her scales were the deep, stormy purple-gray of a twilight sky. Her wings, spanning 30 feet when extended, were now folded with precise, regal grace against her back. She wore minimal adornment, a simple golden torque around her neck and matching bands on her forearms. Beings of her magnitude needed no costume to command attention. Her eyes were the color of molten amber, ancient, intelligent, and utterly certain of their own authority. But it was the figure beside her that stopped the air in Poncho's lungs. A smaller dragon, perhaps 8 years old, stood stiffly next to the Empress. She wore an elaborate dress of pink silk, tailored for wings and a tail. She looked profoundly uncomfortable under the weight of thousands of eyes, her own gaze darting nervously around the ballroom as if searching for an escape route. Poncho leaned forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. The age was right. The coloring was right. The same soft lilac as Talwin's. The subtle, elegant curve of her wings was a mirror image of the ones he had watched develop over 6 years of careful growth. A cold dread, mixed with a wild, impossible hope, washed over him. Could it be? Did Sylvandra have another daughter? One she had actually kept? Honored delegates, the Empress began, her voice carrying across the vast space without technological aid, a natural instrument of power. I stand before you tonight to announce a new era of cooperation between our peoples. For too long, the Draconis Expanse has maintained a position of isolationism, believing our strength lay in our independence. But I have come to understand that true strength is found in unity. in the bonds we forge across the spaces between stars. Polite, measured applause rippled through the crowd. Poncho's eyes remained locked on the small dragon. The resemblance was uncanny, a living echo of his daughter living a life of unimaginable privilege just a few hundred feet away. To symbolize this new commitment, Sylvandra continued, I am pleased to announce the formation of the Concordia Initiative, a joint economic development project that will bring unprecedented prosperity to all participating worlds. The details are complex, but the principle is simple. We are stronger together than apart. More applause. But Poncho barely heard it. His focus, honed by 2 decades of threat assessment, had been snagged by an anomaly in the crowd. A Terran male, middle-aged, wearing formal attire that fit him like a borrowed skin. His posture was too rigid, his eyes too fixed on the stage. And his hand kept drifting to his jacket pocket, touching something hidden there with the nervous, repetitive gesture of a man gathering his courage. Poncho's old training, a ghost in his neural pathways, kicked in before conscious thought could intervene. The assessment was instantaneous. Target fixation. Concealed object. Hostile intent. His fingers flew across the control panel, pulling up security camera feeds, cycling through angles until he found a clear shot of the man's face. Recognition was a cold knife to the gut. Colonel Brennan would have known that face. Sergeant First Class Poncho Brennan, formerly of the 3rd Reconnaissance Unit, had helped put it behind bars. Captain Trevor Ashford, cashiered from service 3 years ago for conduct unbecoming. His family name disgraced, his career obliterated by a court-martial where Poncho had provided the damning evidence of Ashford's illegal weapons sales to insurgent groups. The man had sworn revenge on everyone involved. Ashford's hand slid into his jacket and emerged holding something small and deadly. A miniaturized plasma pulse pistol, a civilian model legal to carry but capable of punching through light body armor at close range. His hands were shaking, but his aim was horrifyingly determined as he raised the weapon, not at the Empress, but at the small, pink-clad dragon standing beside her. Sophia. Time didn't slow down. It shattered into a million crystalline fragments, each one razor-sharp and perfectly clear. Poncho's hand slammed down on the emergency shutdown sequence. The holographic displays died instantly, plunging the ballroom into a darkness punctuated only by the ghostly glow of the floating crystal lamps. In the same motion, he was out of the chair, vaulting over a console, hitting the service door release with his shoulder. The ballroom erupted. Screams, the sound of shattering glass, the frantic shouts of security. The Empress's wings flared wide, a magnificent, instinctive shield around her daughter. Ashford's pistol discharged with a sound like tearing metal and screaming energy. A bolt of superheated plasma streaked across the chaotic darkness on a trajectory that would end in a child's heart. Unless something got in the way. Poncho became that something. He covered the 40 feet in 3.5 seconds, his worn boots finding purchase on the polished floor. He saw Ashford's eyes widen in a flicker of surprise and recognition. He saw the plasma bolt leave the barrel, a tiny star of death. He launched himself up the 3 steps to the stage, his body a final, desperate barrier. The impact was not loud. It was a profound, visceral thud, followed by an agony so pure and white it erased thought. The plasma bolt hit his left shoulder, the heat and kinetic energy spinning him like a ragdoll. He crashed into the small dragon. Sophia. Her name is Sophia. Wrapping his arms around her instinctively, pulling her down, covering her completely with his own body as they fell together to the hard stage floor. His shoulder was a universe of pain. His vision tunneled, graying at the edges. But his arms, trained by a lifetime of duty and reinforced by 6 years of love, remained locked around the trembling child. He kept his body between her and any follow-up shots, his mouth forming words his brain could no longer process. "You're safe now," he whispered into her scales, the scent of her, so like Talwin's, yet different, filling his senses. "You're safe. I've got you." The little dragon was shaking violently beneath him, her small claws gripping his coveralls with desperate strength. She was crying, high-pitched, terrified calls for her mother in a language he couldn't understand. He wanted to comfort her, to tell her that brave fathers protected their daughters, all daughters, but darkness was rushing in, pulling him under. Security swarmed Ashford, dragging him to the ground. The Empress was there in an instant, her massive claws surprisingly gentle as she pulled them apart. She lifted Sophia with one hand, examining her with a frantic, maternal intensity. "Sophia," she cried, her regal composure shattered, reverting to her native tongue. "Sophia, are you hurt? Did the weapon touch you?" "Sophia, not Talwin." The thought surfaced from the drowning depths of his consciousness. A different daughter. A wanted daughter. A wave of hysterical laughter tried to bubble up, but it emerged as a wet cough that tasted of copper and regret. Hands, human hands, rolled him onto his back. Paramedics, their voices calm and professional in the storm. Plasma burn to the shoulder, secondary thermal damage to the chest cavity. BP dropping, pupils dilated, patient in shock, a face swam above his. "Sir, can you hear me? Sir, you need to stay awake. What's your name?" "Brennan," he managed, his tongue a thick, foreign object. "Poncho Brennan, maintenance, sublevel." Then another face filled his vision. The Empress. Her molten amber eyes were wide, not with imperial authority, but with a stunned, human-like disbelief. She reached down, one formidable claw resting directly over his heart, the pressure firm but not piercing. "You saved my daughter," she said, the words quiet, almost reverent. "You are human. You are nobody, and you saved her." "Not nobody," Poncho whispered, the world fading into a corrupted hologram. "Talwin's daddy. That's somebody." Then the darkness claimed him completely, and he fell into a void blessedly free of dreams. He woke to the smell of antiseptic and the low, pervasive hum of medical equipment. The ceiling was the standard white composite of station medical facilities. His left arm was encased in a heavy regeneration sleeve, its biosynthetic fibers slowly, methodically knitting his flesh and bone back together. A dull, Pervasive ache radiated from the wound, muted by the haze of excellent pain medication. Daddy. The word was a lance, piercing the pharmaceutical fog. He turned his head, a slow, careful motion, to find Talwin standing beside the bed, her small claws gripping the safety rail so tightly the metal was deforming. Tears traced gleaming paths down her lilac scales, and her wings trembled with the force of her emotion. "Hey, little dragon," he croaked, his voice a stranger's. "I'm okay. I promise." "You promised you would tuck me in," she accused, the tears flowing faster now. "You promised, and you didn't come home, and Mrs. Halver said you were hurt, and they wouldn't let me see you, and I thought. She couldn't finish, the sentence dissolving into a sob. Poncho's good arm moved, a slow, heavy thing. He didn't have the words. So he just opened it. She climbed onto the bed with exquisite care, curling against his uninjured side, her warmth a familiar comfort. She wrapped her wings around him, a living blanket, and he held her as she cried, her warm breath hitching against his neck, her tail coiling around his leg in that ancient, draconic gesture of desperate love. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," he murmured into the top of her head. "I'm so sorry. But I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." The door to his room hissed open. Poncho looked up, expecting a nurse. Instead, Empress Sylvandra Ashwing filled the doorway, her wings folded tightly to fit through the human-scaled entrance. And beside her, holding her mother's claw, was Sophia. The little dragon looked at him with wide, curious eyes, shy but intent. Talwin lifted her head from his chest. Her tears stopped. Her body went still. Her golden eyes, still swimming with moisture, fixed on the Empress, then on Sophia, then back again. The gears of her brilliant, logical mind were turning, making connections Poncho had prayed she would never have to make. "That's my color," Talwin said, her voice small but clear as ice. "She has my color. The Ashwing purple." The Empress stared at Talwin. Poncho watched the emotions play across her regal features like a storm over a mountain range. Confusion, dawning realization, and finally, a look of pure, unadulterated horror. Her gaze snapped to Poncho, to the maintenance worker who had thrown himself in front of a plasma bolt for a stranger, and understanding crashed down upon her with the weight of a collapsing star. "You," she breathed, the word barely audible. 6 years ago, the military hospital, the attending physician said the hatchling had been claimed by a Terran soldier. But I never asked for a name. You never cared enough to ask." Poncho finished for her, the medication and the fatigue stripping away all pretense. She was an embarrassment, an illegitimate hatchling, from a political liability, so you had her removed from your presence and never looked back. Sylvandra's wings drooped, the very tips brushing the floor. It was a gesture of profound shame, one Poncho had never seen from any dragon, let alone an empress. "That was not. I was different then," she said, her voice thick. "I believed that strength meant standing alone, that attachments were weaknesses to be eliminated. I was wrong about many things." Sophia took a tentative step forward, Her eyes locked on Talwin with fascinated intensity. "You are my sister." Talwin looked at Poncho, a silent question in her eyes. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Half-sister," Talwin corrected with her signature precision. "We have the same mother but different fathers. That makes us half-sisters by Terran legal standards." "I didn't know I had a half-sister," Sophia said, moving closer. "Why did mother not tell me?" "Because I made a mistake," Sylvandra said, the admission seeming to cost her a great deal. "A mistake I am only beginning to understand." She looked at Poncho, and her expression shifted from shame to something else, something akin to awe. "And this human, this maintenance worker, raised the daughter I abandoned and then saved the daughter I kept. His name is Poncho Brennan," Talwin declared, her voice fierce with pride. "He is the best daddy in the entire galaxy. And he fixes things that are broken, and he makes me study my letters even when I don't want to, and he keeps me safe. Always." "I can see that," Sylvandra said quietly. She did something then that Poncho would have believed impossible. She knelt, lowering her immense frame until she was at his eye level, a gesture of respect that shattered 1,000 years of protocol. "I owe you a debt that I can never repay," she said, her molten eyes holding his. "Not just for saving Sophia, but for giving Talwin a life I was too proud and foolish to provide. If there is anything within my power to grant you, name it, and it is yours." Poncho was silent for a long moment. He thought of money, of security, of a job that didn't leave grease under his fingernails. But those were wants, not needs. His true needs were sitting on his hospital bed, her scales pressed against his side. "I want Talwin to know her sister," he said, his voice firm. "I want her to understand where she came from, even if she chooses to stay with me. I want her to have options and opportunities that a maintenance worker's salary can't provide." He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle in the room. "But I also I want you to understand that I am her father. Not by blood, not by species, but by choice. By love. By 6 years of showing up every single day. If you want to be part of her life, I won't stop you. But you do not get to simply take her because your genetics gave her those scales." The Empress met his gaze, and for the first time, he saw not an empress, but a mother. "I would not presume to separate a child from a father who would die for children not even his own," she said, her voice soft. "You have taught me more about true strength in 3 days than I learned in 30 years of rule. Talwin is fortunate beyond measure to have you." Slowly, carefully, she extended her claw. The traditional draconic gesture of respect between equals. Poncho reached out with his good hand. His human fingers were dwarfed, barely spanning the width of her smallest talon. They shook, there in the sterile quiet of the medical bay, and in that contact, something new was born. Not an agreement between an empress and a subject, but a covenant between 2 parents. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of strange new realities. The security footage from the gala became a galactic sensation. The image of the unassuming human maintenance worker throwing himself into the line of fire was beamed across 1,000 worlds. He was a hero, a symbol of interspecies unity, a humble father figure. The media couldn't get enough. Reporters camped outside his apartment. Diplomats offered medals and speaking engagements. Poncho accepted a promotion to senior supervisor. The dizzying salary increase was impossible to refuse, but he declined everything else. He was no hero. He was a father who had done what any father should. The fact that the galaxy found this remarkable was a sad commentary on the state of things. But the good changes were profound. Sylvandra arranged for Talwin and Sophia to attend the same prestigious academy, a place Poncho could never have afforded. The sisters became inseparable, two lilac-scaled forces of nature, discovering a shared love for human historical dramas and competitive mathematics. Their synchronized thinking baffled their teachers and delighted their parents. Poncho began having weekly dinners with the Empress. They were awkward at first, two beings from impossibly different worlds navigating a shared connection. But slowly, the formality melted away. In private, Sylvandra was witty, self-deprecating, and willing to admit her failings with a candor he suspected few ever witnessed. She asked him endless questions about Talwin's childhood, hungering for the details she had missed. "I was raised to believe that emotional attachments made us vulnerable," she confessed one evening over a meal in her private quarters. That a good ruler maintained distance from everyone, including family. It took nearly losing Sophia to understand how profoundly wrong I was. "Talwin makes me vulnerable every single day," Poncho replied, stirring his coffee. "Every time she walks out the door to school, every time she tries something new. But that vulnerability is what makes me strong enough to show up for her. Fear of loss isn't weakness. It's just proof that you have something worth protecting. You should have been a philosopher instead of a soldier. Soldiers learn philosophy the hard way," he said with a wry smile. "Usually about 3 seconds before they do something monumentally stupid." 6 months after the gala, a meeting was requested by the Terran colonial government. Poncho found himself in a secure conference room facing a 3-star admiral whose name he had to struggle to recall. The man looked older, wearier. "Sergeant Brennan," the admiral began. "Or should I say, Mr. Brennan now?" "Mr. works fine," Poncho said. "I resigned my commission 6 years ago. You were copied on the paperwork." "I was," the admiral agreed. "And I signed off on it personally. Though I'll admit, I never understood why one of our best special operations soldiers would walk away from a career with unlimited potential. Now, I think I'm beginning to understand." He pulled up a hologram of Poncho's service record. 19 combat deployments, 43 successful ops, a catalog of valor and expertise. The resume of a weapon. "Mr. Brennan, I'm here to officially apologize. When you requested assistance to adopt that draconis hatchling, we denied you and threatened you with a dishonorable discharge. We believed your judgment was compromised. We were wrong." Poncho was stunned into silence. An apology. An actual, formal apology. The footage of you protecting Sophia Ashwing has been viewed by every member of the High Command. You demonstrated the highest ideals of military service while living a life we tried to prevent you from having. The Admiral paused. I'm also here to offer you full reinstatement, with retroactive rank advancement. The Colonial Marines need men like you. Poncho was quiet, considering. The ghost of the man he'd been. The offer represented everything he'd once thought he wanted. Purpose, respect, stability. But that man was gone. He'd been rebuilt, piece by piece, in the image of a father. Thank you, Admiral, sincerely, he said finally. But I'm going to decline. I have a daughter to raise. Maybe once Talwin's grown, I'll reconsider. But not now. The Admiral smiled, a genuine, tired expression. I thought you might say that. In that case, know that your record has been amended. Anyone who looks up Poncho Brennan will see a soldier who chose honor over career. That's a legacy to be proud of. After the Admiral left, Poncho sat alone, feeling a final, quiet click of closure. He wasn't running from his past anymore. He was integrating it, making peace with the soldier to become the father. Life settled into a new, wonderful, chaotic normal. Talwin and Sophia were a brilliant, terrifying duo. Sylvandra proved to be a surprisingly adaptable co-parent, learning to sit on human-sized furniture and appreciate simple meals. She built a relationship with Talwin based not on biology, but on consistent, genuine presence. I have two families now, Talwin announced one day, a statement of profound simplicity. Daddy's family, where everyone is strange and confused but trying their best. And Mother's family, where everyone is very proper and traditional, but also secretly strange and confused. I think all families are probably strange and confused, and the ones who pretend they're not are just lying better. That might be the wisest thing anyone has ever said in my presence, Sylvandra replied. Daddy taught me. He says wisdom is just being honest about how little you actually know. Your daddy is a very smart human. A year after the gala, on the anniversary of the shooting, Concordia Prime held a memorial ceremony. Poncho attended reluctantly, but when Talwin asked him to speak, he couldn't refuse. He stood on the same stage, looking out at the assembled thousands. Talwin and Sophia sat in the front row, their wings touching. Sylvandra stood to the side, a quiet pillar of support. I'm not very good at speeches, he began, his voice echoing. I'm much better at fixing broken things. But I've been thinking a lot about courage this past year, and I think I've figured something out. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's not about being strong or skilled. Courage is just love, expressed through action, in the moment when it matters most. He looked at his daughter. When I saw that weapon pointed at a child, any child, I didn't think about heroism. I just thought about how I would feel if that was Talwin standing there, and what kind of father I would want protecting her if I couldn't be there myself. The crowd was utterly silent. We all have the capacity for courage. It just requires us to care enough about someone or something to act despite our fear. The maintenance worker who reports a safety hazard. The teacher who advocates for a struggling student. The parent who shows up every day, exhausted and overwhelmed. These are courage, too. His voice grew stronger, filled with a conviction that came from a life lived, not a lesson learned. We spend so much time looking for heroes in the wrong places. But real heroes are usually the quietest people in the room. They're the ones who see what needs doing and do it, without waiting for permission or recognition. They choose connection over isolation. They choose to believe that one person's actions can make a difference. He smiled, a small, genuine thing. 6 years ago, I made a choice to become a father to a child who needed one. It wasn't heroic. It was just a choice born from recognizing that I could do something that mattered, even if it was as simple as changing diapers and reading bedtime stories. And that choice led me here. I threw myself in front of a weapon because I am a father, and fathers protect children. Not just their own, but all children. Because every child deserves to grow up in a universe where adults will stand between them and danger. That's not heroism. That's just basic human decency, wearing courage as a tool. The applause that followed was thunderous, but Poncho barely heard it. He was watching Talwin's face, seeing her golden eyes shining with tears of pride, and that was the only recognition he would ever need. The years unfolded, each one a layer in the story of their family. Talwin grew tall and strong and brilliant, a young dragon who moved between human and draconic cultures with effortless grace. Poncho's hair turned more gray than brown, his face etching itself with laugh lines earned through 1,000 shared jokes and quiet moments. He no longer wore coveralls every day, his promotion to station operations director coming with an office and responsibilities that sometimes required a clean shirt. On Talwin's 16th birthday, he gave her a small, plain box. Inside, on a worn metal chain, were his 2 dog tags. "These were mine," he said softly. "They represent a version of me I left behind to become your father. I want you to have them. Not because I want you to be a soldier, but because I want you to remember that who we are is always less important than who we choose to become." Talwin held them carefully, reading the stamped text. "You never told me you were a sergeant." It didn't seem relevant to fixing atmospheric processors and helping with homework, he replied. "But it's part of my story, and you're old enough now to know the whole thing." So he told her everything. The missions, the ideals, the lives saved and lost. The day he found an abandoned egg and made the choice that redefined his existence. The moment at the gala when love and training became the same thing. When he finished, she carefully placed the chain around her neck, the cool metal resting against her lilac scales. "Thank you for choosing me, Daddy," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for seeing something worth saving in a hatchling that nobody wanted. Thank you for showing me what courage actually looks like." He pulled her into a hug, this daughter who had given his life a meaning deeper than any medal. She was taller than him now, her strength far surpassing his own, but she still fit in his arms perfectly, the small dragon who had needed someone to choose her. "You were always worth saving," he whispered into her scales. From the first moment I saw you, I knew you were going to change everything. And you did, sweetheart. You changed everything. Years later, at her graduation from the Concordia Academy, Poncho sat between Sylvandra and Sophia, watching Talwin accept her honors in astroengineering. She wore his dog tags under her robes. His heart swelled with a pride so immense it was almost painful, bittersweet with the knowledge that his little dragon was ready to fly on her own. After the ceremony, at a family dinner, Talwin made her announcement. I've been accepted to the Terran Colonial Fleet Academy for officer training. I want to serve the way Daddy did. To see the universe and protect people who need protecting. Poncho's fatherly instinct screamed in protest, listing every danger. But he swallowed the fear and asked the only question that mattered. Is this what you really want? Talwin nodded firmly. I want to explore. I want to be part of something larger. I want to serve and protect the way you taught me. But I promise I'll be careful, and I'll write constantly, and I'll come home to eat your mediocre cooking and criticize your terrible taste in historical dramas. My cooking is perfectly adequate. Your cooking is an ongoing culinary crime, Sylvandra interjected, her eyes sparkling. But we love you anyway. The table erupted in laughter, the sound of a family forged not from blood, but from choice, from sacrifice, from love. Poncho looked around at them all. The daughters who were his legacy, the Empress who had become his friend. This messy, complicated, perfect life was not what he'd planned. It was infinitely better. He raised his glass. To family. However we find it. However we build it. To family. They echoed, their voices and clinking glasses a symphony of belonging. Later, back in his apartment, Poncho stood at the viewport, watching the stars. Soon, his daughter would be out there, flying, becoming. And he would be here, supporting her, trusting that the roots he had given her were deep enough, and the wings, strong enough. You are safe now. The words he had whispered on the stage, covered in his own blood, were more than a promise from a single moment. They were the foundation of his life. They were a vow he had renewed every single day. You are safe now, not because the universe was safe, but because he had been there to stand between her and the darkness when it mattered. And he would keep standing there, in big ways and small, for as long as she needed him. That was courage. That was love. That was everything. And it was enough.